Welcome to r/MaliciousCompliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter but not the spirit of a request. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel, and for so many likes. The first story: Assistant Manager demands missing cash. Staff complies with exact penny, including dirty coins. The second story: Boss halted unpaid work. Sparked nationwide controversy. He was dismissed. I'm promoted. Impactful. The third story: Lazy coworker quits abruptly. Asked to return due to staff shortage. Revenge. Refused rehire. He faces consequences. The first story is, sure, we'll pay you back the missing cash. Every last penny. A bit of context: about 20 years ago, after finishing university, I moved back home with my parents while figuring out what I wanted to do next. My hometown is a tourist seaside town in the UK, which especially back then was soul-destroying in the winter, but quite a fun place to be in summer. Lots of pubs and clubs and very busy at weekends with stag do's, hen do's, etc. Although I was living rent-free at the time, I still needed income, whilst I looked for a career, so I got a job as a bartender at the biggest pub and nightclub in town. It was quite a cheesy venue, but it was right in the center of town, so always busy back then, especially on a Saturday night. Although I knew it wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, it was a fun job which wasn't too challenging, and a great place to work as a 21-year-old enjoying my first summer with zero responsibilities. The work was quite seasonal, so generally staff would only stay for a few months, until the end of the summer, then move on. But there were 2 to 3 supervisors and assistant managers who would work there longer. They were usually in their late 20s. One was a girl we'll call Susie, mainly because I can't actually remember her real name now. Susie was generally okay to work with, but if she was having a bad day, could be a bully and a total B. I got the impression she had a bit of a chip on her shoulder because she was still working there in her late 20s, watching those younger than her move on to other things. She would often talk about going on courses to become a qualified cocktail bartender or something, but it never seemed to happen, and she appeared to spend a lot of time partying. She would often turn up to work with a stinking hangover, and then take it out on the rest of the workers, but she was desperate to try to impress management. Anyway, one Saturday night in the middle of summer and the place is rammed. This was before the age of smartphones, Netflix, etc., so in a town like that, there's nothing else to do but go out and get wasted. There were 3 big bars across 3 floors of this place, and every bar was at least 4 deep when we were busy, which was usually between about 10:30 p.m. and 1:30 a.m. Susie was the on-duty assistant manager, so responsible for the whole place, and crucially cashing up at the end of the night. This was the early 2000s, so although we did accept cards, 95% of people paid by cash, as there was no contactless payment yet. It was noisy and dark with incredibly drunk people everywhere, and you had to work a frantic pace to keep up. Hundreds of pounds in cash would go through the tills every night, and you barely had time to think what you were doing. Finally, the end of the night, and we get the last drunk patrons out and tidy the bar. Once done, all the bar and security staff then congregate in the lower bar for a quick drink, to relax before heading home, while Susie is busy catching up, counting the cash from the tills and making sure it tallied with the electronic till records. I think this was the first time she had been trusted with this job on a busy Friday or Saturday night. Suddenly she came storming out of the manager's office and screamed, "Right, the tills are 20 pounds, about $30 down. I'm going out for a cigarette, and when I come back, I expect that missing money to be on the desk. I don't care where it comes from, just do it." I can't remember the exact amount, but it was around that. Basically, in all the commotion of the evening, one or more of the bar staff had forgotten to take cash for an order, or taken the wrong amount, or given too much change back. I'd worked several weekends before this incident, and the managers had never worried about missing money. It was probably just a mistake, and it was a small amount considering how much we take through the night. It happens. However, I think because Susie wanted to make a good impression with management, she didn't want to report that there was money missing, even though it was a small amount. We all look at each other trying not to laugh. I think we all kinda knew that she couldn't do this. At least in the UK, an employer can't just force an employee to pay for a genuine mistake out of their own pocket. But at the same time, we all knew Susie could make our next shifts very uncomfortable if we didn't play ball, cleaning the toilets, etc. So we decided to make up the difference ourselves between the dozen or so bar staff. Well, sort of. Cue malicious compliance. Over the next 10 minutes, all the staff spread out throughout the bars and collected as many random coins as we could find. Coins on the floor dropped by drunkards, and now swimming in pools of beer. Diluted sweat and God knows what else. Coins found down backs of the bar seats covered in hair and other fluff, which had probably been there several years. One of my friends stopped short of fishing a 10p out of the urinal, but anything else was fair game. Some of the staff raided their lockers and pockets for small random coins, but mostly it was cash we found in the aftermath of a sticky, sweaty Saturday night club. Suffice to say, the large mound of coins we found was pretty disgusting, but it was there, every last penny. The pile, which was mostly 1p's, 2p's, and 5p's, was unceremoniously dumped on the manager's desk, just as Susie had instructed, and we all went back to finishing our drinks. I was a little disappointed when Susie returned and didn't explode with rage, but to her credit, she just thanked us and added the filthy mound to the other cash, knowing she couldn't complain. I stayed on a few more weeks after that until after Christmas, when I got a normal 9-to-5 office job, but Susie never bothered us about missing cash again. The second story is, you can't read your newspaper on work time. My best ever malicious compliance. Years ago, I was the systems supervisor at a university-based group. It was a joint group with the administration board and budget coming from university libraries around England and Wales. It was a cutting-edge network to each of the university's libraries, did their book dispensing and receipt, and also did the cataloging, which is quite complex. The catalog entry processing and various other batch processes ran automatically overnight, and the system had to be up and running for 8 a.m. when the libraries opened their doors. Before that could happen, the printouts from the overnight runs needed to be taken off the printer, and the stack of line print paper logs had to be gone through to ensure no failures occurred. Only then could the computer be rebooted into online mode for the libraries. Checking the stack of line printed logs took about an hour, so my practice was to arrive an hour early for work, go through the printouts, then I would restart the computer, and while that process was going on, would get a cup of coffee and sit down to read the news headlines and drink my coffee, maybe a 10-minute break time. Enter my boss, who for a university-educated manager of a university group had the personality of a mid-19th century mill owner. Rude, arrogant, and entitled were just a few words to describe him. We has clashed a few times previous to this, but this was a real kicker. He came in and saw me reading a newspaper and drinking coffee at 8:05 a.m., and not letting me explain, he gave me a good talking to, and told me he didn't expect to see me doing this again. Next day, I came to work at 8 a.m. on the dot. Then got the printout pile and started working through it. Normal pace, no need to dawdle. The libraries were already getting frustrated before I even started the checking process. But they didn't call us. They called him at home. He rushes in at 8:30 demanding to know why the computer wasn't up and available for the libraries yet. I told him because the overnight logs need to be checked for failures first, and that takes almost an hour. He said, "We've been running on this machine for a year. Why has this not been a problem before?" I looked deadpan at him and replied, because until yesterday, I had been given the group an unpaid hour of my time to enable the computers to be available to the libraries at 8 a.m. As my efforts were not only ignored, but treated with such anger yesterday, I've started working to rule on this now. The computer will never be restarted to online mode until these printouts are checked, and that will not start till 8 a.m. He said I can come in early myself and check them. I said not if you don't want a countrywide university workers' strike, you won't. Unions can be useful in some circumstances. Standoff for the next 2 days, followed by the deputy coming in to see me and asking me to a meeting with a group board member, an aged professor, who had come to get this fixed. Boss went away. Deputy, a much better person, got promoted. I got a promotion plus pay rise and asked to change my start time to 7 a.m. Problem solved and everybody was happy, including the board who had had their own problems with the now ex-boss, and were pleased that I had given them the chance to remove him. Edit. He was incredible. I had come from a commercial background and never experienced such a harsh boss. There's a whole list of incidents I recall from the 2 odd years I worked there before he went away. His deputy was very tech, and we got along fine. He didn't worry about the operations team at all. Edit 2. The boss was all standing over me as I sat at my desk when I mentioned that he deflated but refused to back down. An earlier incident had led to all the ops teams joining the union. He hated that we did and that I could shut that thing down virtually on a whim. Anyone who remembers what it was like in 1979 Britain will know what I'm saying is reality. The third story is, my useless coworker said it was his last day. It was. I work at a nursing home as a QMAP, qualified medication assistant personnel. We're super short-staffed. For my first 2 weeks of employment, I had to work 7 days a week because there was no other night shift QMAP. Finally, we hired a new person who we'll call Devin. Devin was useless. I mean genuinely, truly, wholly useless. The only duty he did was administer medications. We only have to pass one med on night shift. The rest of the night, he'd either sit on his phone or sleep. He never cleaned, did paperwork, checked on residents, did follow-ups on P&R medications, charted anything, and even argued with caregivers about who would wipe the A of bedbound residents. To make it worse, he took most of my shifts. He worked 5 nights a week as a QMAP, while I worked the other 2 nights, plus 3 as a caregiver. On the 2 nights where I was QMAP, I had to desperately catch up on everything he let pile up through the week. What normally took maybe 3 hours of work per night suddenly took almost my entire shift. I tried to talk to him multiple times about his lack of work, but it was like talking to a wall. I'd spend 15 minutes begging him to, at the very least, clean the effing kitchen so we don't get ants or mice, and he'd just nod and say, "Yeah, I get it," in the most monotone voice. Admittedly, I wound up blowing up at him twice, but I feel like it was deserved, because he wasn't caring for the residents and he was dead-A lying to my face about his work. Everyone, including my boss, knew he was completely useless, but we didn't have enough staff members to fire him. One Saturday, where it was only me as a caregiver and Devin as QMAP, I'd been called in earlier to work a double shift because we're short-staffed. 30 minutes before shift change, I got a call from my boss saying that Devin quit on the spot. To my understanding, the interaction went as follows. Devin: "I'm changing my schedule to only working 3 days. Boss: "You can't just change your schedule without talking to us." Devin: "Then this was my last shift. I quit." So all of a sudden I was left as the only staff member on shift. I had to do the equivalent of 3 people's jobs. Normally there are 2 caregivers, but like I said, we're short-staffed. Not to mention I'd already worked 8 hours on evening shift. It was a long, exhausting night, and I'm pretty sure I only got everything done thanks to a multi-hour-long adrenaline rush and spite. And I didn't get a break after that, because I was once again faced with the fact that I was the only night QMAP, so I'd have to work every night until we found someone else. However, after a few nights of consistent work, I remembered how effing easy work is when you don't have a mountain of SH to get done. Cut to 5 days ago, and I'm having a medical emergency. Without going into too much detail, I have a PEG tube, and it's been persistently infected and it's gotten worse. I wound up in the hospital, and my boss had to cover me that night. I came back in the night after despite feeling like complete A. Once I got on shift, my boss called me with some news. Devin texted her asking for his job back. Turns out he quit without backup income and was facing the consequences of his own actions. My boss asked me if I wanted to let him come back, since I was sick and still the only night QMAP. I weighed my choices and came to the conclusion that despite feeling like SH and being forced to work every night, it was still less exhausting and strenuous than trying to pick up after Devin. It was a final, beautiful, petty moment of revenge for the hours of stress and strain he put me through. I got to put the nail in his coffin. The idiot clearly didn't want to work, and in no uncertain terms he had told our boss that Saturday had been his last day. Who was I to say otherwise? Edit: I've got some people asking if he knows if it was me. Yes, I texted him separately to inform him. It was professional but very passive-aggressive. Devin, I made the decision with boss to not hire you back. You told me several times that you did not want to work here, and your work ethic reflected this. On top of that, you quit. That's a pretty definitive final statement. Happy travels. Edit 2. Yes, I'm currently very overworked. Everyone at the place I work is, and frankly, every healthcare worker is too. I don't want to quit and I don't intend to. I genuinely love the place I work, and I do truly feel valued as an employee. My boss works just as hard as me, and I've never felt exploited. I know that this isn't the case in most facilities, which is all the more reason why I want to stay. I hope you enjoyed these stories. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel.